"If you can make me walk, I'll give you $1 million, said the billionaire. Then the boy came and did the impossible. Richard Thompson watched the movement in the main square of Rochester through the tinted windows of his adapted Cadillac. 3 years in a wheelchair had turned the powerful businessman into a bitter shadow of his former self. That was when a barefoot boy, no more than 12 years old, slipped past the security cordon and stopped right in front of his wheelchair. With a determination that didn't match his worn-out clothes, the boy looked straight into the billionaire's eyes and said firmly, "I can make you walk again." The security team moved to shoo the boy away, but Richard raised his hand, stopping them. A bitter laugh escaped his lips. "And who are you, kid? Some new charlatan trying to take my money?" "My name is Ethan," the boy replied without flinching, "and I don't want your money. I just want to help." "Help?" Richard leaned forward, his eyes flashing with irony. "Kid, the best doctors in the United States and abroad have already given up. What could a barefoot runt do that they couldn't?" Ethan kept his gaze steady, his small hands clenched into fists at his sides. "They treated your legs, Mr. Thompson, but the problem isn't there." The silence that followed was heavy. Emily, the businessman's daughter and a renowned doctor in New York, quickly approached, her white coat fluttering with her hurried steps. "Dad, let's go. You don't need to pay attention to this." But Richard didn't take his eyes off the boy. There was something in that youthful certainty that intrigued and irritated him in equal measure. "All right, kid. If you can make me take one step, just one step, I'll give you $1 million. The security team exchanged worried glances. Emily grabbed her father's arm. "Dad, this is insane." "That boy is clearly—" "I accept," Ethan interrupted, extending his small, dirt-stained hand. "But it'll take time. You'll have to trust me." Richard stared at that outstretched hand for long seconds. When he finally shook it, he felt the rough calluses of someone who had known hard work from an early age. "You have 3 months, the businessman said. "If you fail, I never want to see your face again." 3 months is enough. Ethan smiled for the first time, a grin that lit up his thin face. "But there's one condition. You'll have to listen to me, really listen." Emily pulled her father aside, lowering her voice. "Dad, this is ridiculous. I'll call security to—" "Emily," Richard cut her off. "It's been 3 years. What more do I have to lose?" The boy took a step back, preparing to leave. "I'll be back tomorrow, 6 in the morning. Will you be awake?" "I don't sleep much anyway," Richard replied bitterly. Ethan nodded and began to walk away. But before disappearing into the crowd in the square, he turned one last time. "Oh, Mr. Thompson, I saw you move your right foot when that pigeon almost landed on your leg. You hide that from everyone, don't you?" Richard's face paled. Emily's eyes widened as she looked from the boy to her father. What is he talking about? But Ethan had already vanished into the crowd, leaving behind a troubled billionaire and a daughter full of questions. That night, Richard couldn't get the boy out of his head. How had he noticed that involuntary movement that even he barely registered? And more importantly, how did he know Richard hid those small spasms from everyone, even the doctors? Emily entered the adapted office where her father spent sleepless nights reviewing reports he could no longer process as he once had. "Dad, we need to talk about what that boy said." "There's nothing to talk about. You've been feeling movement in your legs and didn't tell me?" Her voice trembled between professional indignation and filial hurt. "I'm your daughter and your doctor." Richard turned the chair, turning his back to her. "Just spasms, they don't mean anything." "How can you know without tests? Dad, this could change the whole diagnosis." "Enough, Emily." He slammed his fist on the table. "No more false hope. I've accepted my condition." "Then why did you agree to that boy's proposal?" The question hung in the air. Richard had no answer. Or maybe he did, but didn't want to admit that, deep down, a spark of hope still lingered somewhere in his hardened heart. The next day, at exactly 6 in the morning, the mansion's doorbell rang. Mrs. Margaret, the housekeeper who had served the family for 20 years, answered with a stern face. "We don't take handouts," she said upon seeing the ragged boy. "I'm not here to ask. I'm here to keep an arrangement with Mr. Richard." The woman was about to close the door when her employer's voice echoed through the intercom. "Let him in, Margaret." Reluctantly, the housekeeper opened the gate. Ethan entered, carrying an old, heavy backpack, his bare feet making little noise on the Italian marble of the entryway. Richard waited for him in the physical therapy room, a spacious area with state-of-the-art equipment that hadn't been used in months. "Punctual," the businessman observed. "First good point." Ethan set the backpack down and began pulling out unusual objects: an old tennis ball, elastic bands of different sizes, smooth river stones, a small toy drum. "What is all this junk?" Richard didn't hide his disdain. "Tools," Ethan replied simply. "You've had traditional therapy for 3 years. Let's try something different." "And where did you learn these revolutionary techniques?" "YouTube." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Ethan stopped what he was doing and looked at the man. "My grandfather was a masseur. He worked his whole life in rural Kentucky. He healed many people doctors said would never walk again. He taught me before." The boy's voice faltered for a moment. "Before he passed. And where is this miracle worker now?" "He died 2 years ago, but he left me what he knew." Richard watched as the boy carefully arranged the objects on the floor. There was a method to the apparent chaos. "Let's start with something simple," Ethan said, picking up the tennis ball. "Hold this between your knees." "This is ridiculous." "Really? Then it should be easy." The boy positioned the ball. "Now, hold it for a minute without dropping it." To Richard's surprise, keeping the ball in place required concentration. Muscles he thought completely inactive protested at the minimal effort. "Feel that?" Ethan watched closely. "Your body remembers. It wants to work, but something's blocking it." "Cheap psychology nonsense." "Maybe?" The boy shrugged. "But you're sweating just to hold a simple tennis ball." It was true. Small beads of sweat formed on Richard's forehead. When the ball finally fell, he felt relief, mixed with frustration. "Now," Ethan picked up one of the smooth stones. "I'll place this under your right foot. Try to feel its temperature." "I don't feel anything below my waist, kid." "Try anyway." As Ethan worked, he began telling stories. He spoke about the neighbors in Sunrise Gardens, the poor neighborhood where he lived. He told of Mrs. Wilson, who walked again after a stroke because she needed to care for her grandchildren, of Mr. Johnson, who regained movement to work and support his family. Know what they all had in common? Ethan massaged Richard's feet with precise movements. "A reason to get up. And you think I don't have reasons? I have an empire to run." "Empire," the boy repeated the word as if tasting it. "And what else?" Richard was about to answer when Emily abruptly entered the room. "What's going on here?" She looked horrified at the scattered objects. "Dad, this is completely unhygienic. This boy didn't even wash his hands." "Emily." "No, Dad. As a doctor, I can't allow this." She turned to Ethan. "Young man, I appreciate the intention, but you're the doctor daughter, right?" Ethan interrupted her. "The one who lives in New York and visits once a month?" Emily's face flushed. "What are you implying?" "Nothing, just observing." The boy kept working on Richard's feet. "Your dad counts the hours until your visits, stares at the gate all day when he knows you're coming. How dare you?" "Emily, let the boy work," Richard intervened, surprised at his own decision. "Dad, this is insane. I'm calling Dr. Williams and—" "Dr. Williams, who charges $5,000 a visit just to say there's nothing to be done." The bitterness in Richard's voice was palpable. "Go tend to your patients in New York, Emily. Here, I decide." The woman slammed the door on her way out, leaving an awkward silence. Ethan kept working as if nothing had happened. "She cares about you." "She cares about the inheritance," Richard corrected. "Just like Daniel. Daniel is the son who stole from me." "Yes." The businessman closed his eyes. "Embezzled 20 million from the company with the help of my own accountant. It was the day I found out my legs stopped working." Ethan paused what he was doing. "The same day." "Medical coincidence, according to the specialists. Stress can cause vascular issues." "Or it can cause other things," the boy murmured. Days turned into weeks. Every morning at 6 sharp, Ethan rang the doorbell. Mrs. Wilson didn't even complain anymore, though she still wrinkled her nose at the boy's bare feet. The routine was always the same, yet never identical. Ethan brought different exercises, new stories, perspectives Richard had never considered. The businessman caught himself eagerly waiting for mornings, something that hadn't happened in years. On a rainy Thursday, Ethan arrived soaked. Mrs. Wilson, in a rare moment of compassion, offered him a towel. "Why do your parents let you go out in this rain without an umbrella?" she asked. "I don't have parents, Mum. I live with the folks under the overpass." Richard, listening from the living room, felt something tighten in his chest. "You're homeless." "Technically, I live under the bridge." Ethan dried his face. "But it's temporary. When you pay me the $1 million, I'll buy a house. And if I don't walk again, you will." The boy smiled. "You're already getting better. You just don't realize it yet." It was true, though Richard was reluctant to admit it. The involuntary spasms had increased. Sometimes late at night, he swore he felt tingling where there had only been emptiness before. Emily found out about Ethan's situation through Margaret and was furious. "Dad, you're bringing a beggar into the house. Do you know the risks?" "I know that in 6 weeks this beggar has given me more hope than 3 years of medical treatment." "Hope?" Emily shook her head. "Dad, he's fooling you. He's probably eyeing something to steal. Like your brother did?" The blow was low and they both knew it. Emily paled. "That was unnecessary." "Was it?" "Daniel had everything. Education, opportunities, love. And he betrayed me. This boy has nothing and is here every morning, rain or shine." "For $1 million, Dad? You really think it's about the money?" Richard turned his wheelchair to face his daughter. "When was the last time someone talked to me without checking the clock, without calculating what they could gain? This boy spends hours here and hasn't even asked for a glass of water." Emily didn't answer. The truth hurt more than she cared to admit. The next day she arrived earlier and caught Ethan preparing the room. The boy was humming softly as he arranged his makeshift instruments. "Can I ask you something?" she said from the doorway. Ethan didn't startle. He just nodded. "Why my father? There are so many people who need help." "Because he reminded me of my grandfather," Ethan answered after a moment. "Not in the rich way, obviously, but in the sad way. My grandfather also stopped walking one day, said he had no reason to get up after my grandmother passed." "And did he walk again?" "He did, the day I was born." The boy smiled at the memory. "Said he needed to teach me things before he left. And he did." Emily felt her throat tighten. "How old are you, Ethan?" 12. "I'll be 13 next month." "And how long have you been on your own?" 2 years, but I'm not alone. There's the group from the bridge. We look out for each other." The doctor left the room fighting back tears. How could a 12-year-old carry so much wisdom and pain at once? The 6th week brought the first real crisis. Richard had spent the night reviewing company documents and uncovered more financial holes left by Daniel. The situation was worse than he'd imagined. "No session today," he announced when Ethan arrived. "You can go." "What happened?" "None of your business. Leave, boy." But Ethan didn't move. He sat on the floor, crossed his legs, and waited. "Are you deaf? I told you to leave. I'll wait until you're ready." "I'll never be ready," Richard exploded. "Don't you get it? It's all pointless. Even if I walk again, what for? To watch my empire crumble? To confirm I failed as a father, as a businessman, as everything?" Ethan stayed silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "My grandfather used to say we don't choose our falls, but we choose how we get back up. Your grandfather was a romantic fool." "He was," Ethan agreed, "but he was happy. You're rich, and you're not." Richard threw a paperweight in the boy's direction, barely missing him. "Get out." Ethan stood slowly. "I'll go, but I'll be back tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. Know why? Because you're stubborn and stupid. Because I believe in you, even if you don't believe in yourself." The boy left, leaving Richard alone with his anger. But anger, he realized, was better than emptiness. It was real, alive, pulsing through his veins like nothing had in years. That night, alone in his adapted room, Richard tried to move his toes. To his surprise, his right big toe responded. It was the tiniest movement, barely noticeable, but real. He cried for the first time in 3 years. The next morning, Ethan found a different Richard. Not better, but different. There was a new determination in his eyes. "Let's get to work," the businessman said. "But today you're going to tell me your story, the real one." And Ethan did. About the parents he lost in an accident, about the grandfather who raised him with love and wisdom, about the illness that took the old man and left him alone in the world at 10. "Why didn't you seek help? Shelters? Social services?" "I tried. They separated me from my friends, wanted to send me away. I chose to stay free." Free? Living under a bridge? Free to choose my own path, to help those who need it, to honor what my grandfather taught me. Richard felt something stir inside him. Not pity. Ethan would never accept pity. It was respect, admiration even. "Your grandfather must have been a remarkable man." He was. He healed a lot of people without charging a thing. Said the gift was meant to be shared. "And you? Will you take the million?" Ethan smiled. "If you walk again, you'll know what to do with the money." The 7th week brought Emily back, this time with a proposal. "I found a clinic in Switzerland. Experimental treatment. It might be our last chance." Richard looked at Ethan, who was setting up the day's exercises. "How much?" 3 million. But we could sell the Aspen house." "No." "Dad, be reasonable." "I am. For the first time in years." He gestured for Ethan to continue. "I've already spent fortunes on treatments. This time I'm trying something different." Emily stormed out, but not before exchanging a glance with Ethan. There was something different in that look. No longer disdain, but a reluctant curiosity. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The following weeks brought small but steady progress. Richard could move more fingers, feel temperature changes, even slightly flex his calf muscles. But it was when Ethan brought an unexpected visitor that everything changed. "This is Mr. George," the boy introduced. "He lives under the overpass with me." The man, likely in his 60s, had a noticeable limp. His clothes were simple but clean. "Pleasure to meet you, Dr. Thompson. The boys told me a lot about you." "I'm not a doctor," Richard corrected, intrigued. "To us you are," George smiled. "Ethan's been helping everyone down there with his techniques. I started walking properly again after years of limping." "Is that true?" George raised his left leg, bending it effortlessly. "Badly healed fracture from years ago. The clinic doctor said there was no fixing it, but the boy insisted. 3 months later, here I am." Richard watched Ethan, who seemed embarrassed by the praise. "You've been treating others?" "When I can. What my grandpa taught me isn't meant to be kept to myself. But you could earn money. What for?" Ethan shrugged. "Money without purpose is just paper." That afternoon, after George left, Richard made a decision. "Ethan, I want to make you an offer. There are still 5 weeks left before the deadline." "It's not about that." Richard took a deep breath. "I want you and your friends to move out from under the overpass. I have a guest house in the back. It's been empty for years." The boy's eyes widened. "You're offering a place to stay, temporarily, until I can walk again and pay what I owe. I can't accept." "Why not?" "Because then you'll think I'm doing this for personal gain." "Aren't you?" Ethan looked at him seriously. "I'm doing it because it's right, because I can help, and because—" He hesitated. "Because you remind me of someone I lost." "Your grandfather?" "No, my father." The boy's voice faltered. He was proud too, thought he had to carry the world alone. He died without asking for help when he got sick. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken emotions. Richard extended his hand. "Will you take the house?" Ethan shook the man's hand. "If my friends can come too." "How many?" 5, 6, counting me. "The house has 4 bedrooms. They'll fit." That night, as Ethan and his friends settled into the guest house, Emily arrived in a panic. "Dad, have you lost your mind? Turning the property into a shelter?" I'm putting empty space to use. They're beggars. They could steal, hurt you. Like Daniel did. Richard cut her off. Emily, I'm tired of being afraid. Afraid to trust, to try, to live. These kids have given me more in 2 months than years of medicine. This is an illusion, Dad. Then Richard did something he hadn't done in months. He gripped the arms of his chair and forced himself upward. He couldn't stand, but he lifted himself a few inches before falling back. Emily gasped. How? Hope, sweetheart. Something I'd lost and a barefoot boy gave back to me. The following weeks were transformative. The guest house came alive with the street kids and young residents. Mrs. Wilson, initially resistant, grew fond of the group, especially an 8-year-old girl named Lily. Ethan intensified the exercises. Now Richard spent hours trying to support his own weight, leaning on parallel bars improvised from pipes and ropes. It hurts, the businessman complained. Good. Pain means you're alive, Ethan replied. Sadist. Learned from the best. Didn't you say you ran the company with an iron fist? That was before. Before what? Before I realized an iron fist holds nothing. It only pushes away. It was a painful admission. Richard was beginning to understand that his paralysis hadn't started with Daniel's betrayal, but long before. Years of hardness, choosing work over family, measuring love in numbers. Emily started visiting more often. At first to keep an eye on the new residents, but soon she found herself involved with the group. Her medical training was useful for treating the children's minor health issues. You know, she said one day, bandaging a cut on Lily's knee, I've never felt more like a doctor than I do now. How so? Richard asked. In the hospital, I treat diseases. Here, I care for people. It was on an ordinary Tuesday that the first major breakthrough happened. Ethan had brought his small drum and played simple rhythms while Richard did his exercises. What's that for? Rhythm helps the body remember, Ethan explained. Try to lift to the beat. Richard synchronized his movements with the sound. Up, down, up, down. Suddenly, without realizing it, he was standing. Not completely upright, still leaning on the bars, but standing. My God! Emily, who had entered unnoticed, dropped her bag. Don't move, Ethan instructed calmly. Breathe. Feel the ground under your feet. Richard obeyed. For the first time in 3 years, he felt the weight of his own body on his legs. It was painful, uncomfortable, and absolutely wonderful. I did it, he murmured, tears streaming. I did it. No, Ethan corrected gently. We did it. The news spread through the house. The children came running, Mrs. Wilson cried. Even the gardener stopped working to see. But the moment of joy was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. Daniel entered unannounced, his face a mask of conflicting emotions as he saw his father standing. Dad, what do you want here? Richard's voice was ice cold. I heard you were making progress. I came to ask for forgiveness. Forgiveness? Richard laughed bitterly. 3 years later? I was wrong, I was greedy, stupid. You were a traitor, Emily added. And now that Dad's getting better, you come crawling back? Daniel lowered his head. I lost everything. The money, my friends, my family. Jennifer left me, took the kid, and what do you expect? Pity? Richard gripped the bars tighter. You stole more than money from me, Daniel. You stole my trust, my will to live. I know. No, you don't, Richard thundered. You don't know what it's like to look at your own legs and feel nothing. You don't know what it's like to discover the son you raised is capable of stabbing you in the back. The silence that followed was broken by a small voice. Excuse me, Ethan stepped forward. Can I speak? Everyone turned to the boy. Mr. Daniel, you did something very wrong. But do you know what kept your father in that wheelchair? It wasn't just what you did. It was the hatred he chose to carry. Ethan, Richard began. Let me finish, the boy pleaded. My grandpa used to say forgiveness isn't for the one who did wrong, it's for the one who was hurt. It's choosing to let go of the weight so you can walk again. Daniel looked at the boy curiously. Who are you? The boy who's helping our father walk again, Emily answered. Something you never did. Emily, enough, Richard intervened. He studied Daniel for a long moment. I can't forgive, not yet, but I can try not to hate. It was a start. Small, painful, but a start. Daniel left soon after, promising not to bother them again. But before leaving, he left an envelope with Emily. These are company documents, evidence against the accountant. I know it doesn't change anything, but it's a start. Emily took the envelope. After he left, Richard collapsed into the chair, physically and emotionally exhausted. "Do you think I was weak?" he asked Ethan. "I think you were strong. Holding on to hate is easy. Letting go takes courage." The final weeks of the deadline were approaching. Richard could now stand for minutes at a time, even taking small steps with support. The progress was visible, but he still had a long way to go before walking independently. Emily brought the documents Daniel had left to a lawyer. The evidence was solid. They could recover some of the money and sue the accountant. "That's good news, Dad." "Yeah." But Richard didn't seem excited. "You know what I realized? I spent 3 years thinking about what I lost. I never thought about what I still had." He looked out the window where Ethan was teaching the other children some exercises in the garden. "That boy has nothing and gives everything. I have everything and gave nothing." "That's not true, Dad." "Isn't it? When was the last time I told you I love you, Emily? That I'm proud of you?" Emily swallowed hard. "I don't remember." "Exactly." Richard held his daughter's hand. "I am proud and grateful. You could have given up on me like Daniel did, but you stayed. I'm your daughter and your doctor. You're much more than that. You're my anchor." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. It was a Saturday morning when it happened. Ethan had organized a small party for Lily, who was turning 9. The children ran around the garden. Mrs. Margaret had baked a cake. Even Emily had come from New York just for the occasion. Richard watched from the porch, still in his chair, but with a heart lighter than it had been in years. "Mr. Richard," Lily ran up to him, "come play with us." "I can't, sweetheart. I still can't walk properly." "But you can try." She took his hand. Ethan said trying is what matters most. Something in those hopeful child's eyes touched Richard deeply. He looked at Ethan, who smiled encouragingly. "All right, let's try." With Emily and Ethan's help, Richard stood up. Lily held his hand tightly as if she could transfer energy through touch. "Now take a step," she instructed with childish seriousness. "I've got you." And Richard took a step, then another, and another. No support bars, just Lily's small hand and the presence of Emily and Ethan beside him. "You're doing it!" Lily shouted. "Look, everyone! Uncle Richard is walking!" Everyone stopped to watch. Richard continued, one shaky step at a time, until he reached the middle of the garden. It was only 10 meters, but it felt like a marathon. When he finally stopped, exhausted but triumphant, everyone applauded. Ethan approached, eyes shining with pride. "You did it." "We did it," Richard corrected, echoing the boy's words, "but there's still a month left before the deadline." "The deadline doesn't matter anymore," Ethan said. "The important thing has already happened." "What?" "You found reasons to walk again." It was true. Looking around at Emily smiling, the children celebrating, Margaret wiping away tears, his house full of new life, Richard realized he'd regained much more than the use of his legs. But life has a curious way of testing our strength just when we think we've recovered it. 2 days later, a court officer arrived with a summons. The former accountant, knowing he'd be arrested, had made a desperate move. He claimed Richard was mentally incapacitated and that the company documents were forged. "This is absurd!" Emily was furious. "It's a strategy," the lawyer explained. "If they prove mental incapacity during the wheelchair period, they can void contracts, decisions, and how do we prove I'm sound of mind? A medical board, psychiatric evaluation, and—" The lawyer hesitated. "It would be very good if you could appear in court walking. The trial was scheduled for 3 weeks from now. Ethan's original deadline would run out before then." "We'll intensify the training," the boy decided. "Ethan, this isn't your responsibility." "Yes, it is," the boy interrupted him. "You trusted me. I won't let you down." The days that followed were the most intense. Ethan arrived at 5 in the morning and only left at 8 in the evening. Other residents of the house took turns helping. Emily cancelled commitments in New York to stay by his side, but the stress took its toll. A week before the trial, Richard had a crisis. His legs locked completely, his blood pressure spiked, and panic took over. "It's not going to work," he gasped. "I won't make it." "Yes, you will." Ethan held his hands. "Breathe with me. In, out, in, out. What if I fall in front of the judge? What if I prove I really am incapable?" "You're not your legs," Ethan said firmly. "You're your courage. And you never lost that. You just forgot where you put it." That night, Ethan did something he'd never done before. He told the full story of his grandfather. "His name was Joseph Ethan. I'm named after him. He was the best masseur in 3 towns, even without a diploma. He healed with his hands and his heart." "How did he learn?" "From his father, who learned from his father. A family tradition." Ethan smiled. "But my father didn't want to learn. Said it was a thing of the past. He moved to the city, married my mother." "And you were born there?" "I was. But when I was 5, my parents died. Car accident. My grandfather came for me, raised me, taught me everything." Richard listened in silence. "When he got sick, I tried using what I'd learned to heal him. It didn't work." Ethan's voice trembled. "He said it wasn't my failure, that some illnesses were of the body and some were of time. His was of time. I'm sorry. Before he died, he made me promise one thing." Ethan looked at Richard. "That I'd use the gift to help people find reasons to get back up. He said that was the real power, not healing legs, but healing wills. And you've kept that promise. I try, with you, with the people at the bridge, with anyone who needs it. Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because you weren't ready to hear it. Now you are." 3 days before the trial, Emily brought unexpected news. "Dad, Dr. Richards called. He heard about the case and wants to testify in your favor." Dr. Richards was the most respected neurologist in the country who had given up on Richard's case months earlier. "Why would he do that?" "Because he heard about your progress. He's impressed. He wants to study Ethan's method." "No," Ethan said immediately. "It's not for studying. It's for practicing." "Son, this could validate your work scientifically." "I don't need validation. I know it works. Mr. Thompson walking is my validation." But Richard had another idea. "What if it's not about validating you, but teaching others? How many people could be helped if more knew these techniques?" Ethan thought for a long time. "My grandfather said knowledge kept hidden is knowledge dead. So, maybe, but only if it's taught for free. No charges. We could start a foundation," Emily suggested. "Free treatment for those in need." Ethan's eyes lit up. That's something my grandfather would have liked." On the eve of the trial, Richard barely slept, not from fear but anticipation. So much was at stake. In the morning, Ethan arrived with all the residents of the house. "We came to show support," George explained. "You didn't have to—" "Yes, we did," Lily interrupted. "Family supports family." The word struck him like lightning. Family. That's what this unlikely group had become. "Then we'll go together," Richard decided. The courtroom was packed. The former accountant had hired expensive lawyers and prepared an elaborate strategy. But he hadn't counted on what happened. When they called Richard Thompson, he rose from his wheelchair. Emily on one side, Ethan on the other, but clearly able to walk on his own. The silence in the room was absolute. Step by step, Richard walked up to the judge. His legs trembled, sweat ran down his face, but he didn't stop. "Your Honor," his voice was firm, "I came personally to show that I am in full physical and mental capacity, and that the accusations against me are as false as the character of those making them." The accountant paled. His lawyers whispered frantically. "Mr. Thompson," the judge said, visibly impressed, "when did you regain movement?" "Gradually over the last 3 months, thanks to an unconventional treatment." "What kind of treatment?" Richard looked at Ethan, who watched from the audience. The treatment of hope, Your Honor. Something no money can buy, but something a 12-year-old boy taught me for free. The trial continued, but the outcome was already clear. The evidence presented by Emily, combined with Richard's obvious capability, destroyed the accountant's defense. When they left the courtroom victorious, Richard paused at the top of the stairs. Dozens of steps stretched below. "Do you want the chair?" Emily offered. "No." Richard began descending, gripping the railing. Never again. Ethan walked beside him in silence. When they reached the bottom, the boy smiled. 2 more days to complete 3 months. That's right. Richard had forgotten the original deadline. "You won." "No, we won." "The million is yours." Ethan shook his head. "I don't want it." "What do you mean? That was the deal." "I changed my mind." The boy looked at the group waiting for them. "I'd rather have the foundation, a place where I can teach what my grandfather taught me, where others can learn to walk again." "But Ethan, I need a home, and I already have one." He gestured to his friends. "I need family. I have that too. I need purpose. You gave me that. Money. Money is just paper." Emily stepped closer. "What if the money was used to build the foundation? A rehabilitation center based on your grandfather's techniques. With his name. The Joseph Ethan Rehabilitation Center." Richard tested the name. "It has a nice ring to it." Ethan began to cry. For the first time since they'd met, the strong, wise boy beyond his years was just an emotional child. He would have been so proud. "I'm sure he is." Richard hugged him, wherever he is. A year later, the Joseph Ethan Rehabilitation Center was a reality, a modern yet welcoming building, constructed on the land beside Richard's mansion. Ethan, now 13 and officially adopted by Richard, coordinated training alongside a team of physical therapists who had embraced the unconventional methods. Emily had left the hospital in New York to oversee the medical side of the center. She'd discovered that healing people was infinitely more rewarding than treating illnesses. The Bridge children, now permanently living in the adapted house, helped however they could. Lily had become especially skilled at motivating discouraged patients. Daniel appeared occasionally. His relationship with his father was still strained, but little by little, step by step, like emotional rehabilitation, they were rebuilding lost bonds. Mrs. Wilson managed the house with a firm hand, but a soft heart, making sure no one went hungry or cold. And Richard? Richard hadn't just learned to walk again. He ran every morning, played soccer with the kids, danced at the center's celebrations. One sunny afternoon, as he watched Ethan teaching a new group of volunteers, Emily approached her father. "Are you happy?" "I'm complete," he corrected. "There's a difference." "What is it?" "Happiness comes and goes. Wholeness is knowing you're right where you should be, doing what you ought to do." "And what ought you to do?" Richard watched Ethan patiently demonstrating a technique, the boy's face glowing with the same love his grandfather must have had. "I should have learned sooner that the greatest treasures aren't kept in vaults. They're shared in hugs, in hope, in second chances. You've learned now, thanks to a barefoot boy who dared to believe in me when I didn't even believe in myself." Ethan, as if sensing they were speaking of him, glanced their way and waved. Richard waved back. "You know what he told me the other day?" Richard smiled. "That his grandfather appeared in a dream and said he was proud. Not of him, Ethan, of me." "Why?" "For being brave enough to accept help. Apparently, that's the hardest thing for a man to do." Emily hugged her father. "It was, but you did it." "We did it." Richard repeated the mantra that had become the center's motto. Always, we. The sun set over Rochester, painting the sky in golden hues. Inside the center, another patient took their first steps. On the streets, the story of the boy who made a billionaire walk again spread, bringing hope to others. And on the porch of the house, a grandfather in spirit and a grandson at heart talked about the day, about life, about the miracles that happen when we choose to believe. Because in the end, Ethan had been right all along. The problem was never Richard's legs. It was the weight he chose to carry. And when he finally chose to let go of that weight, to share it, to turn it into something bigger than himself, he discovered he could not only walk, he could fly. The Joseph Ethan Rehabilitation Center served 50 patients a month free of charge. Volunteers came from across the country to learn the techniques. Renowned doctors studied the remarkable results. But for Ethan, the greatest reward was something else. It was seeing in the eyes of every person who walked again the same light he'd seen in Richard's. It was knowing his grandfather's legacy would live on, not in papers or diplomas, but in every step taken by someone who'd given up trying. One special morning, the center received an unexpected visitor. An elderly woman leaning on a walker was brought in by her daughter. "Is this where the miracle boy lives?" she asked. Ethan, passing through the lobby, stopped. "I don't perform miracles, ma'am. I just help people remember how to stand up." The woman studied him for a long moment. "Are you the grandson of Joseph Ethan from Kentucky?" The boy's heart raced. "You knew my grandfather?" "I did." Tears streamed down her wrinkled face. 40 years ago, he made me walk again after an accident. I never got to thank him properly." "What was he like?" Ethan asked eagerly. "You mean, when he was young?" "Just like you," she smiled. Stubborn, kind, and absolutely convinced there wasn't an ailment a good talk and skilled hands couldn't mend. They spent the afternoon talking. The woman shared stories of Ethan's grandfather he'd never heard, about his youth, his dreams, his love for Ethan's grandmother. When she left, she handed him an envelope. "Your grandfather gave this to me 40 years ago. Told me to keep it until I found someone who needed it more than I did. I think that someone is you." Inside was an old photo, a young Joseph Ethan standing beside a beautiful woman, Ethan's grandmother. And on the back, a message: "Love heals, hope lifts, faith moves mountains, but it's the choice to help that changes the world." That evening, Ethan showed the photo to Richard. "He was right," the businessman said. "You changed my world. You changed mine too." "How?" "You gave me a family, showed me a father isn't just who brings you into the world, it's who helps you grow." Richard hugged the boy, his son now, tightly. "You know what I've learned from all this?" "What?" "That the greatest gifts come in the most unexpected packages. You arrived barefoot, dirty, improvised, and you gave me my life back. Technically, sir, you always had life. It was just on pause." "On pause," Richard laughed. "Good definition. And you were the play button." That night, as downtown closed and the lights went out one by one, Ethan climbed to the terrace. It was his place to think, to talk to the stars, and to his grandfather. "I did it, Grandpa, just like you asked. I didn't just heal his legs, I healed his will to live." The wind blew softly, like a caress. Ethan smiled. He knew that wherever he was, Joseph Ethan was proud. But the story still held one last surprise. Months later, while organizing documents at the center, Emily found something extraordinary in Richard's old papers. "Dad, you need to see this." It was a receipt from 20 years ago. A generous payment made to a certain Joseph Ethan masseur for services rendered to employees of Richard's company. I don't remember this." "There's more." Emily showed another paper. "A thank you letter from Ethan's grandfather to you, saying the money allowed him to buy a house and raise his grandson with dignity." Richard's hands trembled. "So, in a way, you helped raise the boy who would save you 20 years later. It was impossible, improbable, miraculous, but real." When they told Ethan, the boy stayed silent for long minutes. "Grandpa always said kindness comes back. Sometimes it takes time, sometimes it comes disguised, but it always returns." "Do you really believe it was a coincidence?" Emily asked. "No," Ethan smiled. "I believe it was purpose. My grandfather brought me to the square that day. Somehow he knew." Richard felt a shiver. He remembered their first meeting, the inexplicable certainty in the boy's eyes. "That's why you were so confident." "No, I was confident because I saw in you what I saw in my grandpa as a child. A good man hidden behind the pain. You just needed help to come out." And so, the circle was complete. The kindness shown decades earlier had returned multiplied. The businessman who had helped unknowingly was saved by the grandson of the man he'd helped. The Joseph Ethan Rehabilitation Center grew. It became a national benchmark. Ethan, now a teenager, studied medicine with Emily while continuing to apply his grandfather's techniques. The combination of ancestral knowledge and modern science produced extraordinary results. Richard had regained not just his legs, but his empire. Yet now he ran it differently, with compassion, with purpose beyond profit. Half the earnings went to the center and social projects. Daniel, completely transformed by the experience, worked in the center's administration. Redemption, he discovered, came from serving others. The children from the bridge, Lily, Jason, Peter, Anna, Charles, attended the best schools, but kept their feet on the ground and their hearts open. They volunteered at the center in their free time, multiplying the kindness they'd received. Mrs. Wilson, promoted to general housekeeper, made sure no one left the center without a hot meal and a hug. And Emily? Emily had found her true calling. She wasn't just a doctor, she was a healer in the broadest sense, tending to bodies, but mostly to souls. At a special ceremony, the center received a national award for innovation in healthcare. Ethan was called to speak. "My grandfather used to say," he began, his clear voice echoing in the packed auditorium, "there are two kinds of paralysis, that of the body and that of the soul. The body's time and medicine can heal. The soul's, only love can cure." He paused, searching for Richard in the crowd. 3 years ago, I met a man paralyzed in both ways. Today, that man doesn't just walk, he runs, he dances, he hugs, but more importantly, he loves. He loves life, loves people, loves possibilities. Richard wiped away a discreet tear. "The secret isn't in the techniques my grandfather taught me, though they help. The secret is believing that everyone deserves a second chance to get back up, and being brave enough to accept help when it's offered." The auditorium erupted in applause, but Ethan wasn't finished yet. "That's why today I announce that the Joseph Ethan Center will expand. With the help of the man who gave me a family, my heart's father, Richard Thompson, we'll open centers in every state capital, because everyone deserves the chance to walk again, in body and soul." The ovation was deafening. Richard stepped onto the stage and embraced his son. Emily joined them, Daniel too, the children, Margaret, everyone who had been touched and transformed by a barefoot boy and his unshakable faith. Years passed. Ethan became a doctor, specializing in neurology and physical therapy. But he never abandoned his grandfather's techniques. On the contrary, he documented them, studied them scientifically, and proved their effectiveness. He married a volunteer from the center, had children, and taught them what his grandfather had taught him, ensuring the knowledge lived on. Richard grew old surrounded by love, not just from Emily and Daniel, now fully reconciled, but from dozens of grandchildren who called him Grandpa. His mansion, once empty and silent, buzzed with life. One ordinary afternoon, now in his 80s, but still steady on his feet, Richard sat in the garden with Ethan, now a grown man. "You know what my biggest mistake was?" he asked. "What?" "Thinking strength meant not needing anyone, when really, strength is admitting we do. You learned. Thanks to you." Richard held his adoptive son's hand. "Ethan, I need to tell you something. I'm sick." The doctor in Ethan tensed, but the son simply squeezed his father's hand. "Serious?" "Terminal, but I'm not afraid." Richard smiled. "I've lived more in the last 20 years than in the 60 before. I'm at peace." "How long?" "Months, maybe a year." They sat in silence, watching the sunset. "You know what I want?" Richard broke the quiet. "Tell me." "I want to spend that time teaching at the center, showing that age isn't an excuse to stop, that as long as there's life, there's a chance to help. It'd be an honor to have you as a teacher." "Not a teacher, a student," Richard laughed. "I still have so much to learn about giving without expecting anything back." And so it was. Richard's final months were his fullest. He taught, learned, and loved. He watched the center multiply, saw Ethan's grandfather's techniques save thousands. When the end came, he was surrounded by everyone he loved. No machines, no hospital. At home, in peace. "Ethan," he called weakly. "I'm here, Dad. Remember what you said that first day? That I'd know what to do with the million when I walked again? I remember. You were right. I knew exactly what to do. I invested in hope. And the return..." He looked around at the dozens of beloved faces. "The return was infinite." Those were his last lucid words. He passed at dawn, a smile on his lips. The funeral was the largest Rochester had ever seen, not because of Richard's wealth or power, but because of the love he'd inspired. Thousands came to thank, to witness, to honor. Ethan spoke for them all. Richard Thompson was many things: a businessman, a billionaire, a philanthropist. But above all, he was living proof that it's never too late to change, to love, to rise again. He gave me more than a home or a name. He gave me the chance to fulfill my promise to my grandfather on a scale I never imagined. Because of him, the Joseph Ethan Center is real. Because of him, thousands have walked again. But his greatest legacy isn't the buildings or the numbers. It's the lesson that true wealth is measured in lives transformed. And by that measure, Richard died the richest man in the world. The center kept growing. Ethan took the helm, preserving its spirit of generosity and love. Emily oversaw medical expansion. Daniel, fully redeemed, managed finances with exemplary honesty. The children from the bridge, now grown, spread across the country carrying the method and the philosophy. Lily became a psychologist, specializing in paralyzing trauma. Jason, a physical therapist. Peter, a teacher, each multiplying the kindness they had received. Mrs. Margaret, now elderly but still active, ensured the family spirit of the center remained, no matter how much it grew. And so, what began with a barefoot boy making an impossible promise became a national movement of healing and hope, because Ethan was right from the start. The problem is never just physical, it's emotional, spiritual, social. And real healing comes when we treat the whole person, not just the symptom. Years later, a reporter asked Ethan, now gray-haired and respected worldwide, what the secret to the method's success was. "There's no secret," he replied. "Just the simple truth that everyone can rise if they have someone who believes in them. My grandfather believed in me. I believed in Richard. Richard believed in thousands. It's a chain of faith." But what about the techniques, the exercises? They're important, but without love, they're just empty movements. What heals is the connection. It's looking someone in the eye and saying, "I believe you can," and being there every day, proving it. It sounds too simple. The best truths always are. Ethan smiled. "My grandfather used to say, we complicate what's simple because we fear the power of simplicity." And what is that power? The power to change the world. One person, one step, one act of faith at a time. The Joseph Ethan Rehabilitation Center now has locations across the United States and is beginning international expansion. But it keeps its essence. Free, holistic treatment, rooted in the unshakable belief that everyone deserves and can rise. On the walls of the original center, a plaque sums it all up. Here, a barefoot boy taught a billionaire that the greatest wealth is helping others rise, in memory of Joseph Ethan, who healed with his hands, of Richard Thompson, who learned to heal with his heart, and in honor of all who choose to believe that one more step is always possible. And every day, somewhere in the country, someone who had given up walks again, not just with their legs, but with their soul, proving miracles exist. They just disguise themselves as barefoot boys carrying old backpacks full of hope. The end of the story. And so ends our moving journey. Tell us in the comments, do you believe in the power of hope to transform lives? Leave a like if this story touched your heart, and subscribe for more tales of perseverance and love.